Well, I see that many of you did have the preamble memorized. I heard you singing. But how many of you can recite the first 10 amendments to the Constitution? We might have some lawyers in here that committed that to memory at some point in their life. I'm going to read those and offer brief comments. These are ministers' comments, not a lawyer's comments. And so I know there are people who are much more expert than I. First Amendment. Congress should make no law respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or of the right of people peaceably to assemble and to give petition to the government for redress of grievances. Now, I always thought that the First Amendment should be about 5. When I'm thinking about what the rights do we have, it seems like there's a list of them there. So they started off with a list. And I think it's important that the first thing on the list is Congress should make no law respecting the establishment of a religion. And they also, in the Constitution, have a clause that says there should be no religious tests for public offices. And the establishment of religion is an issue whenever our tax dollars are used to support sectarian prayer or religious displays in public property. I mean, if we really truly wanted to put something on the courthouse lawn this season, we should probably put a copy of the Bill of Rights for everybody to read. No individual faith is prohibited, but the government must remain neutral. And this is amazing that even after all these years, we still have to fight this battle. In the bastion of liberalness in North Carolina, Asheville, there is a group trying to recall a councilman because he is an atheist. Because it is in the North Carolina Constitution that office holders should be Christian. And this guy is a member of our UU church in Asheville. It was in the paper today. And so that they're not going to get anywhere with this suit, but it's a waste of time and energy that he even has to address this going in. I mean, similar laws have been overturned. But you always wonder when courts have appointees to it with political agendas, and both sides of the political agenda think that the other side does this, how secure our rights may be. And that's why it's good to celebrate our rights in the Bill of Rights, at least once a year, maybe every day of the year. Free speech. There are some people I would like to shut up. But I don't want to live in a society where people that have unpopular views are shut up. And so the answer to free speech is more free speech. If there's free speech that you disagree with, find your friends and convince others to speak louder, more clearly, more truthfully, and hope that that truth wins out. The right of people to peaceably assemble means that we can take to the street as long as the authorities don't consider it a riot. Now that is a movable line, too. In 1968, at the Democratic Convention, Mayor Daley said, "The police didn't create disorder, we're here to preserve disorder." In what was later concluded to be a police riot of the disturbing the peace protests in Chicago. And petitioning the government for redress of grievances. Well, if you want to outlaw lobbyists, it's unconstitutional. There they have it. They have their grievances, their ideas of how things should be, and again, the answer to voices that we don't like is to raise our own and make sure that ours are heard. The Second Amendment. A well-regulated militia. I like how this starts with well-regulated. Being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms should not be infringed. This amendment is also controversial. Supporters of this document often ignore the first clause, a well-regulated militia. They view any regulation of gun to be an infringement. But I think a well-regulated militia should include registering guns. Registering cars doesn't infringe on our driving. But if a car is used in a crime, we can trace it to its owner. A well-regulated militia requires training, and no one should be allowed to buy guns until they pass tests, like a driver's test. Now, state militias have generally been replaced by the National Guard. Should all gun owners be required to enlist? Because we have a whole different system now than what we had then. This is inherited from English law, where everybody subject of the king's duty was to bear arms for the defense of the kingdom. And then in England, they had a little thing where certain militias of the Catholic persuasion kicked out the king. And when they got kicked out, the law was rewritten that it was the right of all Protestants to be able to raise militias. And so our founding fathers took the English law that started with a duty and expanded the right to all people to raise militias here in the United States. And I'm going to move on because we can talk about that one forever. The next one's pretty easy. No soldier in time of peace be quartered in any house without the consent of the owner, nor in time of war, but in a manner prescribed by law. Now, this doesn't seem to happen anymore, but basically, if you live near Fort Bragg, the soldiers just can't come and take over your house. And this is what was done during British colonial rule, and our founding fathers said never again. The Fourth Amendment. The right of people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the person or things to be seized. This amendment protects the right of privacy. Now, some argue that the word privacy is nowhere in the Constitution, but what else could be meant by secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures? The word effects, in my opinion, should include medical records, phone calls, and electronic communications. Now, a so-called originalist or strict constructionist might say that these items were not invented and therefore do not fit what the people in the Constitution were talking about. They were only talking about paper, and it's not what the original framers intended. And of course, if they argue that position, then I suggest that only arms protected by the Second Amendment are muzzle loaders and single-shot pistols. No person, number 5, should be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime unless on presentation or indictment of a grand jury, except for cases arising in the land or naval forces or in the militias, when in actual service in a time of war or public danger, which means our soldiers might have different rules that apply to them, but the people we capture, perhaps not. Nor shall any person be subject for the same offense, be twice put in jeopardy for life or limb, compelled in any criminal case to witness against himself. This is what's meant when you plead the fifth. Nor be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. Nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. In the recent drug wars, whenever they think they have a drug bust, if they find an ounce of marijuana or a pound of marijuana in your house, they can seize your house. And that house can be up for auction and gone, even if you are acquitted of the crime. We need to celebrate and look at these rights. And there are things about habeas lawyers help me, habeas corpus, which the idea of having people in secret prisons does not seem to fit. People need to be told why they're being held and the nature and the cause of the accusation. And in the Sixth Amendment, the accused shall enjoy the right of a speedy and public trial by impartial jury in the state and district wherein the crime shall have been committed. So that if the crime was committed in New York, the trial should happen in New York. That's what the Constitution says, much to the chagrin of many people who think that we shouldn't trust our Constitution to try people who have committed crimes against our nation. And then the amendment of number 7, suits in common law, that's civil suits, where the value of the controversy shall exceed $20, the right of trial by jury shall be preserved. And I guess nowadays, that would mean all suits. Because I think to talk to a lawyer to say hi on the phone sometimes costs $20. And then Amendment 8, excessive bail should not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel or unusual punishment inflicted. For a while in this country, the death penalty was deemed a cruel and unusual punishment, which even I, who am against the death penalty, thought was a strange reading of the Constitution, since previous amendment refers to capital offenses. There was just the assumption that the death penalty would exist. But then you now hear arguments against the death penalty by injection that say that the combination of drugs causes someone to be paralyzed, and then the painful medicine is given, and they have no way to show that they're being tortured and while they're being put to death. So you have these nuances of law that get argued in our courts of whether, even if the death penalty is okay, what is the most least cruel or unusual way to kill someone. And then Amendments 9 and 10. They seem redundant to me, but to a lawyer they probably do not as much. Amendment 9 preserves rights to the people, and Amendment 10 to the states. 9 reads, the enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. And that means that, well, since the Constitution didn't mention it, you don't have that right, would be how someone could violate this Constitution. And then 10, the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited to it by the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. This is where a lot of argument goes on in our laws. That in the Asheville case about the atheists, the settled law in the land right now is that the U.S. Constitution is primary, and so they have ruled on this, and so a state can't make a law that takes away a constitutional right. The person lives in America, and the states can't be more restrictive. But it's fuzzy. Now, states' rights was used to protect the property rights of Southern slave owners. And states' rights oftentimes is used to restrict freedom, although in recent years it's kind of turned on its head. That in states that have passed medical marijuana laws or marriage laws for lesbians and gays, they're arguing the states' rights case that we should be able to extend these freedoms even if the federal government doesn't. And so it's a real question of who's in charge here. And I find myself flipping on the issue of states' rights and personal rights versus federal control depending on the issue. When I think somebody else should have the law enforced on them, I'm for a strong federal government. There's an old saying that a liberal is a conservative, or how's this go? A conservative is a liberal that has been mugged, wants the law enforced. And a liberal is a conservative who finds himself in court and wants all the protections of the Constitution. So it often does depend on what side of this issue you're on. And Thomas Jefferson, in the Declaration of Independence, which is often confused with the Constitution, has no legal standing, gave us that phrase, inalienable rights, which he may have borrowed from Thomas Paine. And I think we have to realize that although that's a wonderful idea, we of the church, of the inherent worth and dignity of every person, to think that rights are these core things that exist in reality outside of ourselves. They are rights and they're inalienable. There's no way that they can be taken away from us. But I think every right we have is alienable. We can be separated from our rights. I've seen a bumper sticker that says, "Ignore your rights and they'll go away." And that's why I think today we should celebrate our Bill of Rights and our democracy and our right to debate and to use our free speech. And so I even have written a hymn for the season, our first Bill of Rights carol. The tune is familiar. You may remember the doxology if you grew up in a Christian church in your youth. But I ask you to please rise and sing this hymn to democracy as strong and as loud as you can, defending your right to free speech.
State your opinion clear and strong. Cherish debates that are prolonged. The meeting never seems to end. Have faith and hope that truth will win.